And what did it give to people, these mass meetings? When the merchant leaves his lonely shop, yeah, and joins in the crowd in action, then he feels one, and he's happy, one with the others, and he's happy. He's lost his loneliness.
Oh, it was great to go to a rally. All the uniforms, and there was an electric atmosphere already before it all started. There was singing going on, and then suddenly it was announced, der Führer kommt, the Führer is coming, and then we saw him walking up to the stage, and there was shouting of Heil, 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 Heil.
As the Nazi frenzy swept Germany, Hitler made clear what he expected from the nation. The party is the selecting ground for German political leaders. Its doctrine will be unchangeable. Its organizations will be as hard as steel. Its total image, however, will be like a holy order. Nazi mass rallies were carefully orchestrated to build to an overwhelming emotional epiphany that evoked a religious fervor. At the center of this ritual was Hitler. Everything was constructed to make Hitler look like divinity. Messiah. Having won the unquestioning support of the German people, Hitler was now ready to dominate the world. From the onset of the war in 1939, country after country fell to the Nazis. By the winter of 1942, however, the tide turned, and the Nazis began to experience what they thought was impossible. Defeat. As the Nazi war effort grew more and more desperate, they expanded their use of the occult sciences, from research and ritual to a basis for making military decisions. Certain members of the German Naval Command became convinced that the Allies were already employing mystical forces to wage war against Germany. They believed that the British successes at locating and destroying German U-boats had been achieved through occult means, and that the best way to combat this was also by using the occult as a weapon. This led Himmler to establish a top-secret institute dedicated to the ancient occult practice of pendulum dowsing. Over maps of the North Atlantic, clairvoyants would swing an object suspended from a string, attempting to locate the position of Allied convoys. German U-boat missions were dispatched based on the results. In this letter written by Himmler, dated January the 12th, 1943, he refers to dowsing research and training having made great progress during the year. Still, the most common occult arts employed by the Nazis Nazis were astrology and prophecy, although they were approached in two distinctly different ways. Rudolf Hess and Heinrich Himmler genuinely believed in the occult and used it for making political decisions. But Joseph Goebbels, head of the propaganda ministry, wanted to use the occult purely for propaganda purposes, to manipulate people and undermine Allied morale. Goebbels soon became aware of a great source of mystical knowledge, the predictions of Nostradamus. One of the most celebrated visionaries of all time, Nostradamus completed his masterpiece of prophecy in 1555. The book contains subtle references to a crisis in Britain and Poland in the year 1939, the year Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Nearly 400 years after Nostradamus wrote his book. For Goebbels, Nostradamus was a perfect propaganda tool, whose work could be interpreted as predicting a great victory in Germany's future.
Nostradamus' prophecies are written in four-line poems called quatrains, and they're so dense and esoteric that you can interpret them in many different ways.
To interpret the French prophet, Goebbels recruited renowned astrologer and Nostradamus expert Karl Ernst Kraft. A particular quatrain that Goebbels seized on seemed to refer directly to Hitler, and quickly became part of the Nazi leader's mystique.
There's a very famous quatrain which has got the word Hister in it, which, you know, was everyone was bandying around, was saying that that was Hitler.
In Goebbels' diary, he expressed his excitement when Berndt, a member of his staff, began to formulate a plan to use the prophecy. 19th of May, 1942. Berndt handed in a plan for the occultist propaganda to be carried on by us. We are getting somewhere. The Americans and English fall easily to this kind of propaganda. We are therefore pressing into service all star witnesses of occult prophecy. Nostradamus must once again submit to being quoted. The creation of fake prophecies and fraudulent mysticism to influence the enemy became known as black propaganda.
Yes, they made up a flyer of the Nostradamus prophecies and threw them all over France, that France would be destroyed if it did not capitulate.
British intelligence discovered the deception and, recognizing its propaganda potential, began to wage their own Nostradamus campaign.
The British actually picked up on this. They produced a volume of 50 fake Nostradamus prophecies which forecast British victory on the war.
Just as the Nazis had flooded France with fake Nostradamus prophecies, the Allies smuggled their own black propaganda into Germany. The black propaganda campaign in England soon took a new turn with the arrival of Hungarian Jewish émigré and astrologer Louis de Vol. Recruited by British intelligence, de Vol was assigned to work with master counterfeiter Elik Howe.
And Elik's great skill was as a forger. I mean, you know, forging documents, forging magazines, forging Nostradamus quatrains.
Howe and de Vol decided to create a counterfeit version of Germany's leading astrological magazine, Zenit.
They produced 2 issues in 1943. In these, they would try and make forecasts which would undermine German morale. They would, for example, say, watch out for June the 30th, the anniversary of the Night of the Long Knives. Now, the purpose behind this forecast was to somehow plant in the minds of the Germans the fact that the SS might now be disloyal to Hitler.
But Howe's masterstroke came with a so-called special edition of Der Zenit, dated April 1943. He cleverly waited until July to publish an April edition, thus seemingly being able to predict events he knew would come true.
And what Howe and his colleagues did was to look at the sinking of German submarines, record the dates, and then, in producing the April edition, produce these dates as if they were forecasts.
British intelligence believed that if these predictions were picked up by the crews of German U-boats, the result would be a loss of morale and possibly even mutiny. The British counterfeit Der Zenit, however, contained one glaring error. They incorrectly titled the magazine Der Zenit instead of the actual title Zenit. Astrology and espionage would soon collide again, in what is still considered by many to be the most bizarre incident of the Second World War. When Rudolf Hess, the deputy Führer and one of Hitler's closest friends and advisors, made an astonishing solo flight to Scotland. Hess's idea to make the flight began with his belief that the British, a Nordic race, would be made sympathetic to the Aryan cause and could even be persuaded to side with the Germans if only Churchill could be overthrown. One of Hess's mentors, Karl Haushofer, reinforced this idea by telling Hess about a dream he had. In it, he saw Hess walking through a Scottish castle with tapestries hanging from the walls, bringing peace between Germany and Great Britain. In addition to prophecy, astrology would also come to play a role in Hess's decision to make the flight.
Rudolf Hess, along with Himmler, was probably the leading Nazi most interested in astrology. He accepted it totally.
Astrologer and close friend Ernst Schulte Strathaus cast a horoscope for the deputy Führer that revealed an auspicious arrangement of the planets.
On May 10th, 1941, there was a particularly powerful astronomical lineup. Basically, there were 6 planets in Taurus and a full moon exactly on the opposite side of the zodiac in Scorpio. And according to astrological tradition, when you get such a lineup, you'll get a major shift in global affairs. And therefore, it was fair to assume that May the 10th, 1941 could provide the turning point in the war.
There has always been some doubt whether Hess flew to Scotland based upon astrological advice. However, recently discovered documents written by Hess from prison in England include a letter to his mother. In it, he asked her to have 2 documents notarized: a record of Karl Haushofer's dream and the horoscope cast by Schulte Strathaus. Before Hess made the flight, some believe he conferred with the Führer.
6 days before my father flew, there was a discussion between Hitler and my father.
Ey huzura ermiş nefis,